From Jefferson's point of view, the federal government is the problem. The Supreme Court is a branch of the problem. You don't refer a dispute like this between the states and the federal government to the federal government. It would be like you and I are having a dispute, and I say, oh, I have just the impartial arbiter for this, my mother. All right, she's a fair-minded, wonderful woman. And I'm not just saying this because I have no idea what YouTube channel this might wind up on someday. But, you know, I wouldn't bet my life that she's going to vote against me. So Jefferson's view was, no, the federal courts are a party to one of the sides. You know, like they're one of the parties in this contest. You can't refer it to them. It doesn't even make sense. No. In this case, the states are the proper disputants, as the states confer among themselves and ask, did we intend to delegate this power to the federal government? Those are the proper disputants. And that was Jefferson's view. That was James Madison's view, as he wrote in the famous Report of 1800, sometimes called the Virginia Report. He said, it's not the case, I'm paraphrasing, he said, it's not the case that our presidents are fallible, our congressmen are fallible, but our judges are divine. That's not our system. He says, to the contrary, all three branches can betray us. And so there needs to be a last resort mechanism when we've been betrayed by everybody. And that mechanism consists of the parties to the Constitution themselves, namely the states, having a last resort no. That's what Jefferson called nullification. He introduced that word into the American political vocabulary. And Patrick Henry said at that ratifying convention, I'm concerned about this Constitution, because that general welfare clause, every tyrant says that all the things he's doing are for the general welfare. We have no guarantee this thing isn't going to commit all kinds of enormities against us. And so Edmund Randolph stood up and said, you don't have anything to worry about because this is a limited government of enumerated powers, and so no phrase like that can amount to an additional delegation of power. The delegation of power is spelled out clearly. We've got all these things the federal government can do, and he even said that the federal government will have only those powers that are expressly delegated. So he used even stronger language than would be used in the 10th Amendment. His whole fascist view is that the nation needs to speak with one voice. Well, that's not what the United States is. The United States was supposed to be something different among the nations. Because at the time the United States was being born, there was already a trend towards centralization, and it would accelerate in the 19th century with the unification of Germany, the unification of Italy, centralization in Japan. It's going on everywhere. This idea that became mainstream in the West, that the only way you can organize political society is to have one irresistible power center ruling over a bunch of helpless individuals. But that wasn't the United States model. The United States looked to an older model, the older model in which Western liberty was born. The model in Europe, whereby you didn't just have one irresistible power center telling everybody else what to do. You had all these small little associations in society, churches and cities and towns and guilds and universities, and they all had their privileges and immunities. They all had their liberties that they were going to defend. And so there was no power in society that could demand that they all conform, because they were all ready to resist. They weren't just a bunch of isolated individuals. They had powers that came before the king's power. They had powers that came before the center's power, and that's how liberty came to Europe. Liberty came to Europe because after you got rid of the Roman Empire fell, there was no continent-wide empire that replaced it. What you had was a whole bunch of tiny little principalities, and when all the principalities are tiny, it conduces to liberty, because if you oppress people, all they got to do is move 10 feet away. And that keeps the ambitions of princes limited. And so that's why it's important for us to remember, to think about, where is liberty most likely to be preserved today? Under one giant jurisdiction or under a multiplicity of competing jurisdictions? Well, we are taught not to think that way. We're taught to think the 19th century and late 18th century French revolutionary heresy of political centralization is the only way of organizing society. The United States was an experiment in saying no to that. Because the United States, if you look in the Constitution, is never once referred to in the singular. It's never referred to in the singular. It's always referred to in the plural. Because that's what we are. What makes us great is not that we're a great big country. The Soviet Union was a great big country. China under Mao was a great big country, and tens of millions of people died. That doesn't make you great. And there are tiny little places on the globe that are wonderful and great places to live. Renaissance Florence was a wonderful place to live. It's not the size. It's the fact that we're a collection of societies, that we haven't yielded everything to the center, that we have retained corporate bodies like states that have powers of resistance, but those powers have lain dormant for too long. And so now it is time, I suggest, that we have the political imagination, not, thank goodness, to have to think of something from scratch, but to have the presence of mind and the courage to look back to our own tradition and say, no, this is not the way we're supposed to live. We are not supposed to live with over 300 million people accepting the infallible judgments of some king. No, we are supposed to be a free people. The world is full of centralized states. Germany, France, England, everywhere. The world has enough of those. Let's be the exception. Let's be the exception for liberty and be the beacon to the world to reverse this trend and bring back both liberty and civilization to the United States and to the world. Thank you very much.